Joining me now from London is Kayode Ogundamisi, Nigerian commentator and pro-democracy activist. From Abuja, Baba Aye is national convener of United Action for Democracy, the largest rights-based coalition in Nigeria. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Kayode, let me start with you. We just heard government officials tell us in that report that the war against Boko Haram is being won, that the insurgency is decimated, as one official said there. Do you believe that to be the case? Because we've just seen some very serious attacks by Boko Haram. Last week, 68 people killed. This week, 2 suicide bombers killing more than 50 people. Is the war being won here?
I'm afraid not. It's a bit premature for the government to actually declare victory over Boko Haram. But you can't deny the fact that they've actually made the Nigerian troops, that is, have made quite a huge, significant progress in capturing territories, restricting Boko Haram to the Sambisa forest area. But it was a wrong strategy for the government to first give a deadline of December 31st in an insurgency that is more of a guerrilla warfare, and then prematurely declare victory over Boko Haram. It just reminds you of George Bush on that air freight carrier declaring victory in Iraq, and here we're still talking about Iraq today. Progress is being made, but it is not enough because Boko Haram still as potent as ever in carrying out suicide attacks on the civilian populace.
Baba Aye, talking about strategy, can Boko Haram be defeated on the battlefield? Is the Nigerian army up to the job? Because there has been criticism of the army in the past that they've not been up to the job and that they don't have the ability to do it.
I think it's quite a tall order to think that the military could militarily that the state could militarily defeat Boko Haram. But I actually also think it's rather disingenuous on the part of the state to talk about rolling back Boko Haram's onslaught. Let's look at the facts of the matter. Is that the government got in on the mantra of change, and it has actually done less in the past 7-8 months than what the former government did within February and March, when it liberated 17 out of the 21 local government areas that were under Boko Haram. So I think that you are having a lot of hype, and we are being made to now argue on how plausible could it roll it back. It's impossible, in my view, to militarily defeat Boko Haram, and also we are having a kind of painted picture of what is not really it. A lot has been done, but much less than it has claimed to do, and much less than what the last government did at the twilight, yes, agreeably, of its report, which the current party in power raised every question possible in the book in challenging the former government about not taking steps to curb Boko Haram and defeat it militarily. And don't forget, and that's why it's having to tell us that Boko Haram has been technically defeated. It claimed that it would defeat Boko Haram without looking at the reality of the dynamics of asymmetrical warfare.
Kayode, if we look at just the numbers, Boko Haram has killed something like 20,000 people, 2.3 million people displaced, and more than 1 million children have been forced from school. The Global Terrorism Index, which tracks these groups, tells us that Boko Haram is now the world's deadliest terror organization. Yet we don't see it getting the kind of attention. We don't see this problem getting the kind of attention that Islamic State gets in the Middle East. It seems to be neglected. It seems to be left to the Nigerian government to do. We don't see international attention being focused on it. Why is that?
Well, African lives are usually seen as the dark continent, and it doesn't really matter. And it doesn't make any difference to the global media if 36 are killed today, 100 killed yesterday in Nigeria. That has been a country where people are just simply tired, really. I mean, they read about it every day. So the Bring Back Our Girls, the missing girls, Chibok girls, going on for almost 2 years, and nothing was done. So people just get fatigued about the killings in Nigeria. And again, you also have to look at within Nigeria itself. You get news about these killings from the media outside of Nigeria. The media within Nigeria in itself are really not doing a lot of reporting about these killings in the northern part of Nigeria. So you wouldn't want to blame the outside world for not speaking. And the Nigerian government, as it is, are doing some sort of damage control. It seems the less importance you give to the killings, it makes the government look good. So they need to be more transparent to the Nigerian people and to the world about the reality of what is happening. That yes, you're trying to win the war, but you're not winning the war yet. And one of the things I really want to point out here is that when we're looking forward, the Nigerian military infantry is quite capable of defeating Boko Haram. But the problem they have from sources I have within the military is we don't have a air force. We don't have the capacity and the capability, and the help they are seeking for the international community is an air drone that can have 24 to 48 hours surveillance to get the movement of these terrorists and engage them. But the military are not getting that. You have infantry officers saying when they sight Boko Haram, they call for air support. They will never get air support. So you would ask the Nigerian government why they're not leveling up to the Nigerian people or seeking for help from the international community in terms of specific military assistance. The Americans have got drones in neighboring countries like Cameroon and Niger. The French have got drones in neighboring countries. Why are they not focusing on Sambisa Forest? Because you need to first decimate the physical Boko Haram before you now go into the community to help the community.
Right, Baba Aye, when we look at this battle, Boko Haram didn't emerge in a vacuum. I mean, there's some context to this. There were problems in northern Nigeria. It's been an area that's been historically neglected by the Nigerian government. There were no opportunities, job opportunities, there was no education opportunities. Is the government now addressing those grievances as well?
Exactly. I think, and the northeast particularly, even within the north, is particularly the most backward part of the country. I don't think the government is adequately addressing it. I don't think the government is adequately addressing it because you still have, well, there could be the argument of that it's barely 1 year that the current government got into power, and it has said it will have a master plan for rehabilitation, socioeconomic transformation of the area. But we aren't seeing the signs of such possibilities with the kind of depth that it requires to break centuries of despoliation and backwardness. However, permit me to point out two related things here. One, the issue about the number of persons. About 20,000 people have died, but I wouldn't say it's Boko Haram that has killed about 20,000 people. And the reason is this: there are, including the Amnesty International, several organizations have pointed out that the Nigerian army has killed about as many people as Boko Haram. And what are the impact? What impact does this have? You're talking about to defeat Boko Haram, so to speak. You need to win the minds, the souls of a broad spectrum, a broad array of persons, because Boko Haram, it represents the third, what I described somewhere else as the lethal wave of militant Islamism. The fact of the matter, you see, if you talk of drones, you talk of bombing the places, and besides, if you had women and children as human shield, even if you got fighter jets, I mean, that doesn't resolve the question. But the fact, as I have argued, is this: if you were to assume that Boko Haram could be militarily defeated, a dozen Boko Harams would replace Boko Haram without addressing the roots, the socioeconomic roots of what brought about Boko Haram. And that's why the question you ask is of utmost importance, and why it is rather unfortunate that this is not being adequately addressed.
Kayode, where does Boko Haram get its support from? Where does it get its money from, its weapons from?
Well, like every terrorist group, they get this, their money through international terrorism. They have links to Al Qaeda in the Maghreb. They have some sort of alliance with ISIL, and they carry out a lot of kidnappings. Before Boko Haram got to this stage, in the northern part of the country, there were a lot of high-profile kidnapping cases involving Boko Haram, and I think they had a stash of wealth. And of course, you also know that within the community itself, I was in Maiduguri recently. I was as recent as August of last year, and it was quite amazing when I speak to some of the people in the streets on the streets of Maiduguri, and they tell me that look, there are some level of sympathy towards Boko Haram. because when they started, they were fighting against the injustice within the community, the corruption by the political elite in the ruling class in northern Nigeria and in Nigeria as a whole, until the violence and killings and kidnappings came in. So the funding of Boko Haram came from a right of international terrorists, giving them money. They go into local kidnappings. Of course, there are rumors and there are indicators that there are actually people who sponsor them. The last government claimed they were being sponsored by political opponents, but we're yet to see any evidence of that till date. So it's largely a very wealthy group that gets funding from multiple sources.
Kayode, how does Boko Haram recruit its fighters, and what kind of support does the group get in those villages and towns in northern Nigeria where it operates?
Boko Haram does not have a lot of support within the community, but they have they've got huge sympathizers. Quite a number of the suicide bombers, the ones that were not successful actually, from indicators, seemed like they were either sort of compelled because they kidnap family members and then they send them on the mission. And you see the use of very young children, which is quite recent in the activities of this terrorist group. And you see them going around the community, embedding in the community, and then planting cells to carry out this deadly act. In terms of recruitment, it's quite difficult to actually say this is a way, but you have indoctrination of the community. You have, when a community is captured, and then they get people from those communities, they take them away. Having spent a number of time, then they start believing in the ideology of the terrorist group and they carry out the act. Let me quickly comment on one issue that we must address here. Look, one of the problems the Nigerian government or the Nigerian military face is that the army is trained to actually liberate territories. As we speak today, most of these territories don't have the local police. You have no civil society. You don't have the state security service, and not a number of policemen would not want to go to that part of the region, to that part of Nigeria. So right now, it's important for the Nigerian government to recruit more policemen, more local civil defense networks, so that the people in the IDP camps will go back to their community.
Baba Ayo, one of the groups that's being targeted by Boko Haram are women. Especially women in that part of the country, in those camps as well. I want you to take a listen to what one woman told us about what she thinks about Boko Haram. Let's watch.
Boko Haram are in my village. People fled, my child fled, but my husband was killed. If our people return with Boko Haram everywhere in my village, how do we get in? Our village is full of Boko Haram.
So, Baba Ayo, we're getting many reports that Boko Haram is enslaving women and forcing them to join the war as well. What do we know about how women are being abused in this war?
I think the extent of what we know cannot but be limited, but to the extent of what we know, it is terrible. During the liberation of some of Boko Haram's camps last year, you had dozens of young women impregnated. Some of them were actually also had several sexually transmitted infections. But rape is, and that is what Boko Haram is using it for. It's a wicked manifestation of power, an evil power. It's part of a broader patriarchal ideology of Boko Haram. It's plunder, and I think it's when Boko Haram says it's against, it's anti-modernist in a sense, and that, amongst other things, is to say that it does not see women as having rights, as being wholly human. And it is from that perspective you can understand this deranged treatment of women. But permit me also the issue of the funding. I think you should look at, when we look at the funding, it was raised earlier, there are different phases. Different phases of Boko Haram, how different funds have come in is very, very important. Before the lethal wave of Boko Haram in 2009, don't forget that it had over 250,000 members. This was part of what politicians like the then contestant for governor, Shetima, leveraged on. And when politicians also wooed it in 2003, millions of naira came into its pocket. And currently, apart from money, it has support within ranks of the ruling elite in Nigeria. The current leader of the Senate, Senator Ali Ndume, there is still a standing case in which there were text messages exchanged between him and Boko Haram fighters. That matters. In a saner society, someone like that should even not be back in the Senate rather than now being the leader of the Senate. And secondly, on February 7, two explosive devices experts of the 143 Battalion were arrested by the secret police for packaging weapons. So apart from money, weaponry, including uniforms of Nigerian army, we have been frittered off to Boko Haram. So these are part of why the situation is a very complex one. And I mean, to cut the head of the snake requires winning the soul of the people, winning the minds of the people, requires going beyond the military, requires even a fight back, which involves the people, like what the civilian JTF demonstrated has been possible before its subsequent incorporation.